Good afternoon. We're back in session and we'll begin the afternoon with the Government and Community Affairs Committee chaired by Mr. Wendell Hall. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Wendell Hall, and along with Jill Pennitz, we represent the Community Affairs Committee. Today we will be bringing to the group our committee work based upon the 4 priorities that we have set for the 2024 legislative year. We understand there's a short session coming in, and as we work to try to prioritize these 4, we included, of course, other members of the board, along with the leadership, and Ms. Moore was a part of the committee as we discussed these short-term items. This is for action tomorrow because of the time frame that we're dealing with the General Assembly coming in to do its work. The first short-term goal or priority request is $4.5 million to continue funding efforts to transform our schools designated as low performing. We feel as though that action should continue with the CARES program. We fully understand the fact that it's still under development, and there are some things that I know DPI is looking at to enhance it further, but we have found that it has shown progress and been effective thus far in helping our low-performing school districts. The next short-term priority ask will be to support DPI's efforts for a statewide policy framework for math that includes early math screener and PD, professional development, for elementary math teachers. We also ask for and support DPI's efforts to expand Read to Achieve professional development to middle grade school teachers. Along with, and we've heard a lot of the report today coming from the mental health issues with our student population, but we also look forward to getting a joint ask with the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Resources. We heard the Secretary speak today and other members concerning the need for evidence-based, preventive, and early intervention. You might ask yourself, well, what are we talking about here? Well, we still want to dialogue with the department to see what they're asking for and see if we can come to a full understanding between the two entities to come up with that particular ask. But before we do that, we will certainly, the committee, Mr. Chairman, will surely bring it back to the group, to you, leadership, and at some point in time soon, maybe to the board, have to be to the board for its final approval on that particular item. So that's where we are right now as a committee and what we are proposing. But let me also share some things concerning the board stance. As for, you might want to call it a preamble to the things that we do. You know, we have a preamble to the Constitution. Let me read a couple to you. The North Carolina State Board of Education continues to support efforts towards school performance, grade redesign, and increasing teacher pay and opportunity, and it will continue to hold these initiatives as a high priority. Of course, that's a money one, and that's for the long term. But also, the State Board focuses advocacy over the next few months on funding requests appropriate for the short session and acutely designed to directly impact students and schools. One of those 4 goals that I just mentioned to you, or short-term requests. There remains a sense of urgency to assist public school districts and charter schools to improve the quality of instruction and school climate. And school climate, my friends, is important. That's an item that we have to be more focused on and use a razor approach to dealing with school climate, because it truly affects academic performance of students. Someone mentioned earlier this morning, I think it was a gentleman from Stanley, about teachers loving students in a small district. And let me say this, love has no boundaries. It's not a little love, a lot of, it's just love. And it can be for one student, 2 students, or 50 students. Children know it in the classroom. So we're talking about that climate. Additional funding can and will lead to refinement of sustainable models that results in long-term outcomes. Getting back again to some of the programs that we have in place, DPI has in place, that's under revision. And to look and see if we can redesign it to make it more effective once it's implemented in the school districts and the classrooms across this great state. There remains a lot to do, especially after the pandemic, and we have done things to have shown us that it works even with the aftermath. And I think some of the issues that we're dealing with now with the balance, with suspension, with absenteeism, it's because we have not really gotten over the pandemic. We're still dealing with the after effects of it. And some of our children can't handle it alone. And by the way, we have educators too that we must include. I was listening to the presentation earlier about the clinics on site. If teachers don't have to leave school to go to see a doctor for a cold or something, maybe they can see the doctor telemedicine. I think it's a new term now. And the kids can also won't have to stay home all the time because they have sniffles. This is a new arena for us. It's a new ball game, Mr. Chairman, and my fellow board members. But those are the goals, those are the priorities that we're putting forth at this time for action tomorrow. And may I just repeat them once again, so we will all know. $4.5 million to continue funding efforts to transform schools designated as low-performing schools. A joint ask with Department of Health and Human Services that still is to be developed, still to be approved by this board before we go forward with the ask. Support DPI's efforts for a statewide policy framework for math that includes early math screener, PD for elementary math teachers, and support for DPI's efforts to expand Read to Achieve professional development to middle schools. And I think one of the slides today pointed out the need for more to be looked at middle schools. I'm a firm believer in middle schools. All of us believe in middle schools, but I think that target group, because let's face it, kids don't decide to drop out at middle school. I'm sorry, they start thinking about it at middle school. When they hit the 9th grade, that age factor, they're ready to make their decisions. Mr. Chairman, that is the committee's report. We will stand to ask any questions that you or any other member of this group or this board has. Jill, anything you want to add to that?
I think you did a beautiful job of laying it out there.
Well, thank you. I'll tell my wife that. Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Hall. I agree. I think you did a marvelous job laying out those 4 priorities. Just one point of clarification. On the joint ask with DHHS, we realize there's not a set of specifics that we're asking for the board support on. We do have the Secretary's presentation today, which has a number of ideas of areas of collaboration, and the schedule is such that we may have to submit the specifics before our next regularly scheduled meeting. If that's the case, then what we're asking is if the board would authorize the Government Community Affairs Committee along with board leadership to finalize those specifics, and then we would come back to the board in March with the full report of the specifics. Otherwise, we would need to have a specially called meeting in the interim. So, any questions on that little aspect? Okay. Thanks, Mr. Hall.
I do have one question, or clarification I'd like to ask for, and this may come to you, Superintendent Truitt. On the PD for middle school for Read to Achieve, where does 4th and 5th grade use of Amplify come? Are we asking for that as well, or is that sort of included in that? I wasn't sure.
That will be a separate, that will be an amendment of an existing contract that we will need to be asking funding for. So that is part of what I will share tomorrow, yes.
Okay.
But that, I would suggest, knowing how you all feel about that, it needs to be added to this list. Because it
I was
is,
wondering, we ought to be right.
yes, it is a separate fiscal impact from the professional development for middle grades teachers.
Yeah, when I was reviewing last night, it occurred to me that that was not necessarily inclusive of the others. So
Correct.
should have thought of that sooner, but.
Yes, ma'am.
Would it be appropriate to sort of keep the last bullet and after read to achieve, double bullet, professional development for middle grades teachers and the LFI for fourth and fifth grade?
I would say
Or is it separate
there,
ask?
so first of all, we need to change Read to Achieve to Excellent Public Schools Act because the name has changed. And I would add either a sub-bullet under there or technically a second bullet should read, expand early screener contract, statewide contract to include, grades 4 and 5. Let me think about this, because it's not just the financial, it's also mandating that 4th and 5th grade teachers do this.
There's a policy.
How about if
So
Mr.
we-
Faria could work with you and your team to refine
Yep.
those?
Definitely.
I'm absolutely certain we're all committed to the same
Yep.
objective, so we'll get the words right for tomorrow's motion.
Great.
Yeah.
Hearing none other, Mr. Chairman, that's the committee's report.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mr. Hall. That'll be back before us tomorrow as GAC 1 on our action agenda. We'll now move to the Education, Innovation, and Charter Schools Committee led by Mr. John Blackburn. Mr. Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I serve as the chair of this committee with my vice chair, Ms. Jill Kamnitz. The first order of business is Ms. Ashley Vaquero is going to give us a Charter School Review Board update. Hey, Ashley.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. We had our Charter Schools Review Board meeting the week after your January meeting. So a quick review of the actions taken at that time. The main agenda items for those 2 days was the conclusion of our 2023 charter school application interviews. So the 2023 application cycle has concluded. There were 15 total applications received this year, which is a fairly low number. 3 withdrew, so we only ended up interviewing 12. 4 were denied by the Charter Schools Review Board, and 8 were approved. So there was an approval rate of about 53%. The approved schools, one is a replication. It's called Crossnor Community Charter in Forsyth County. And again, these are all standard applications, so none of these charter schools would open until fall 2025. And that is only if they make it through the rigorous 2-year RTO process. And no funding flows to those schools until they get their charter agreement, which would happen sometime in fall 2025. We have a movement school in Gaston County that was approved, a movement school in Greensboro that was approved. Carolina Achieve is a school slated for Orange County. Liberty Charter Academy is slated for Guilford County. Triad International Studies Academy, Guilford County. Hype Leadership, Hoke County. And Sledge Institute, Vance County. So those are the 8 approved schools. Our 2024 application opened last Friday. There's a period until the last Friday of April in which applications will be reviewed or will be submitted. Evaluations take place during the summer, and then we begin interviewing again next September. And then next month, we meet next Monday and Tuesday, a very busy schedule, and it's mainly charter renewal presentations and voting. Any questions? Anything else?
Any questions of Ms. Picard? Thank you, Ashley.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. We've got a couple of items for discussion. The first one is State Board of Education Policy Amendment Charter Renewal Process. So in your board packet, on your in your EICS, if you will look, we have put the things that we talked about last month back on again for the red line version, the renewal guidelines. So all of those are back in there for my fellow board members to look at. Once again, this is a discussion item. I would like to tell my fellow board members that on the 22nd, we met, my fellow board member and I, my committee member and I, met with the folks from the Charter Review Board and got their feedback. And we had a very positive conversation, spent some time with them, getting their ideas on how these guidelines could be improved and made the process easier. And that's what we want to achieve from this. So unless there's any other questions, does any of my board members have any questions about those? Okay. So thank you. That is still a discussion item. So the Charter Review Board, they're going to consider it fairly soon, I think next week. And so we hopefully will have a recommendation to y'all fairly quickly. Thank you. And now EICS 2 is report to the North Carolina General Assembly. Ms. Shanae, how are you? Welcome.
How are you?
Good, welcome. This is a report to the General Assembly on the Career and College Promise and Cooperative Innovation High School programs. And so, my fellow board members, this is good news today. So, good news report.
Yes, I love bringing good news to you. And I know every single one of you read this entire 100-page document that I really think was longer than my thesis. And so first I want to thank Isaac Lake and our team back there. Isaac has taken the lead on preparing this report along with our partners in higher education, and so we're so grateful for the work that we get to share with you for one of our most successful programs, in my opinion, here in North Carolina. And so I'm going to kind of review some basic information because some of you are newer to the board, though I know most are here are familiar with Career and College Promise, but this report is legislated, and we're going to walk through all sorts of things and all the requirements that they have. But this really is about our Career and College Promise program. So this is the program that really adds so much value to our high school diploma here in North Carolina. It is about offering structured opportunities, not just a course here and there, but structured opportunities for our high school eligible students to attend a college and obtain credit without charge. It's a pretty remarkable program with great investment from our state, but also incredible results. And that's what we're here today to talk to you about. So the first two, so Career and College Promise has three different pathways, okay? So the first two, one is college transfer, one is career and technical education, which also encompasses workforce, Con Ed, and then the third are our cooperative innovative high schools, also known as our early colleges. So we're going to address all three, but the first half of the report, which used to be two separate reports, now it's combined into a massive report, will be the first two pathways. And then that is with the college transfer pathway and our CTE pathway. And these pathways are really for students who stay in their base high school versus our cooperative innovative high school programs and can access these courses through their high school, mostly for juniors and seniors, and with exception to 9th and 10th graders. So these courses are available in every high school, and for some colleges, actually, a large percentage of their population are our babies. And so we're very grateful for this partnership. So here's some fun data. Now, you know me, I like sparkles, and so we'll just pretend I'm throwing sparkles and all sorts of other good things. But last year, of our graduates, 35% of our graduates enrolled in a CCP course. 35%. So when we say, when you hear some of the things you hear, versus recognizing, oh wow, the success and the choice options that we have in our public schools, it's remarkable to think that over a third of our high school graduates enrolled and took advantage of accessing college in high school. It's incredible, okay? And of that, we have children enrolled in an average of 7 college courses in their high school career. 7. Now, that's not, that's not the olden days of, I don't know, those of you that remember Huskins. Huskins was where a kid just decided, hey, I want to go try this. I want to go try this. No, this is about completion and credentials and leaving with something that's very worthwhile. Very similar to Trey's, all of the incredible work, right, that you've heard from Trey and Nancy and everybody with CTE. This is that other idea of completion and working through that. So some other data I want to share with you. So is of those 35%, we have 33% that actually earned that credit, okay? So only about 2% of our students, and that's a 3% increase, which is really exciting. Now, the better piece of data is that third star. That third star is what we're going to see, right? Because we've rebounded now post-COVID, and now we're going to just I think, fly, and we're seeing it. So if we were to look at all students in our public schools and our public high schools who are enrolled, we increased 12% last year. So I can only imagine what the next several years are going to bring with our graduate data, but that to me is where I would put lots of sprinkles and sparkles, is that we've increased 12%. And as always, and this is something I've shared with you, but I know Dr. Williams and Superintendent Moore, this may be new, although y'all may know this, that our students perform better than the average adult student in the colleges. And so I think that is something in our community colleges. That is just something to recognize just how amazing our students are. And that's the support of the teachers and all the infrastructure and the fact that they're really given all that holistic support. So just incredible things that are happening. Now, the board asked me a few years ago, and my team's mission of equity and excellence and ensuring we are expanding excellence across, we do have that demographic breakdown. And what is really exciting this year is that we had double digits increase with our native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islanders. That is super exciting, and an increase with all of our subgroups, including our Asian population, which to me also is expanding their access. I will say, out of all of our advanced learning opportunities, when we think of dual enrollment, this is where we have more equitable representation than in any of our programs. And that is just super exciting to think. Over a fifth of all of our Black or African American students are accessing this. That is just exciting, and we don't see those numbers and lots of other things. So excited and to celebrate this and to share and to give congratulations to all of the systems that are involved to do this, because it is not easy to blend two different systems of education, one being compulsory, one being elective. And blending those are not easy for our administrators. And so kudos to everybody and our teachers for their incredible work with this program. Okay. On to other fun things. So this is actually part of the report that comes from the Community College office. So this report will actually be presented at the Community College Board, is also supported with the UNC Board and the North Carolina Independent Colleges. And so this is part of their report, okay? So from their data, they're actually able to divide up and really look at where that increase is actually coming from. And where we see it is we do have double digits in all of the pathways with CTE and college transfer, but most of our increase is actually in our workforce Con Ed area, because that's one of our newer areas and where a lot of local needs can be met. But our CTE pathway, not only in our state, continues to grow and to serve, so does the CTE program at our community college, and we have significant pathway and sharing agreements, articulation agreements between both. I keep looking back there for Trey to make sure I'm saying the right things, between the two, and that's super exciting. The other piece is the average GPA. So the average GPA of our kids are 3.5 in the community college system. So just putting that out there to think, and this is a wide range of students as well. That's just super, just fantastic. Then we have a slide about lots of wage earnings where you can read a lot more about it. With the community college, I did a study with the Department of Commerce There, I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of background for this, but we can get questions answered for you if you would like. But there is significant information in the report. We did see an increase of out-of-pocket expenses, especially for CTE pathways for schools, based on the community college research, which would make sense, right? Having to purchase supplemental resources for those courses. That's some of the basic fun data. Didn't see a lot of sparkles. I'm assuming there's sparkles in your eyes and lots of good feelings there. But we did implement your policy that you passed to develop a partnership agreement last year. We passed that policy that we really need to ensure all of these students are in fact supported. To ensure we have systems in place and infrastructure. So just know that our team, Isaac and the team, have been working with the community colleges to do a significant PD, help them develop these partnerships with the colleges. Our community college partners as well have been doing that. And we're hoping that work is really going to strengthen, where we get some calls of kids of that 2% who are falling through the cracks. How can we not let that happen, right? Because these are students we don't ever want a kid to fall through the cracks. So that is happening, just to let you know. Now, we don't collect those. That's not something at the time the board was interested in doing, but if you ever have questions about them, let us know. We do continue to work with our districts with that. We have monthly meetings, lots of professional development, et cetera, because it's all about communication between these two systems to ensure things are moving in the right direction and clear. For example, just to kind of make this come alive for you, there are situations where colleges allow students to drop a class, later in the semester, sometimes even in late November. Well, if a kid drops a class in late November, our drop ad is the first 20 days of school. So, how are we going to support that, right? And so this partnership agreement is really starting to help have some of those challenges, to help clarify all of the differences and strengthen our partnerships. We do have a partnership, we are in partnership with USCD, with the USCD grant with the Serve Center and RAND. I'm just going to we're in the closing out of that grant in the last year. Lots of great research there. There's an appendix in your document. Maybe next year we may bring them, so that'll be the end of that research study. But one thing that I just really appreciate is they have really clear data that shows the benefits for our low-income students. And of course, that's something I think we all would probably assume, right? That would make sense. But now, it's very clear with the research that the benefits for economically disadvantaged students were generally larger than other populations. So when we think of access and we think of expanding excellence, this is a program that is doing that for sure. So now we're going to go to the other pathway, which is the other star for our cooperative innovative high school programs, okay? So this is for our early colleges in North Carolina. A lot of people nationally call them early colleges. We have an official title. And this is where it's not open to every high school student. They don't stay in their base school. This is where they actually go, and there's a separate school typically on the college campus, and it is a holistic 9th through 13th grade experience. And so we do have this notion, we have 134 of these schools across our great state. Most of them partner with our community colleges. We have 11 with our UNC institutions and 5 with our independents. So kind of across the entire state. We do have some gaps. And in some of our gaps, I'll be honest, they're a little smaller. School districts that really can't manage a second high school. So I'm hopeful in the next year with some creative thinking, maybe we can work with our friends across the street and really think about how can we bring this type of effort to some of our smaller districts, because if you're tiny, you're not really able to divide, 100 kids. So we want to continue to work on that effort. I will say a lot of the other districts, some of the other districts that don't have one, they do a lot of work with CCP in general. One of the districts is farther from a community college, so having an early college would be harder. So I feel still really good about this map here and where we're moving with that. So some interesting key data points about these programs. Our numbers stay about the same, a slight decrease. Of course, that's makes sense because the enrollment for these schools were around COVID, right? So it's a little decrease right now. But look at the numbers, 3,400 associate degrees, in addition to their high school diplomas, right? Over 3,400 industry recognized credentials and over 1,300 diplomas, certificate credentials. So significant earnings of dual enrollment and benefits. So we're super excited. Of course, the entire system of an early college is what does it. And we're going to hear from some students in just a minute. Our numbers for, this is part of the legislative requirements for UNC admissions has gone up. A slight decrease of students applying to independent colleges. And again, for these, all of our numbers outdo. I know when Christy brings up all the awards up here, there's usually an early college sprinkled in most of all of them. I mean, they do incredible work. The teachers there, the faculty, the staff, and the small nature between the resources that we're able to provide for them, they do just incredible work for our students. We do have 2 new ones that next month we will be asking for approval of these 2, but while I'm up here today, I just want to share a little bit about them with you. We have 2 that the Joint Advisory Committee which is officials from the community college system, the UNC system, and the independent colleges have gone through a rigorous application. And Dare County and the College of Albemarle will be opening their first, if approved by you all and everybody else in the General Assembly, their first Cooperative Innovative High School, so we're super excited about that. And they really are focused on CTE pathways like welding and HVAC and electrical and plumbing and CNAs, so just really things tied into their economy, which is exciting. Rockingham is going to be, has proposed, and we are asking, we'll ask next month for approval, is for a second Cooperative Innovative High School. And for them, it'll be the first one focused on CTE, which is just super exciting. And in that one, I love this, that they want to really look at advanced manufacturing, including the health sciences. So just some great opportunities for students to expand. And so next month, we'll be asking you for a recommendation there. So at the end of this report, there are pages upon pages. If you ever need a day that you need to be reminded of the amazing work each of you do, and more importantly, the more amazing work our teachers and schools are doing, read these stories. Just pick one up, read one at nighttime. They take a minute to read. Isaac has slimmed them down so they're easily digestible. It's incredible to see some of these stories. And today, of these stories, we actually have 2 students with us who are Zooming in because they have school and then one's working. But they're going to share with you some of their experience. And Michael Green, is from Anson County, and we have Carrie, our principal, Miss Decker, who is with us. Yes, so we will be able to have them share. Michael's story is incredible. He has had a lot of challenges that have really led him to persist over the years, from not having permanent housing to lots of other family issues. But he is incredible and is now supporting his entire family as a welder. So are we good to go? Ruben? Principal Decker, are we good?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna let you take it from here and talk about Michael, and then Michael can share his experience.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Carrie Decker, and I am the principal at Anson County Early College. We're located in Polkton, North Carolina, and we are on the campus of South Piedmont Community College. So today I have one of my students with me, Michael Green, and he graduated from Anson Early College in May of 2023 with his welding certification. And I met Michael for the first time when he came to visit at Open House. So I'm excited to be here and excited for Michael to share his story.
Hi, I'm Michael. When I first came down here, it was open house. I was in 8th grade. I came down here by myself or on my bike down here. I met Miss Decker and all the other teachers. I noticed how nice they were, how small this place was, which made it look easier for me to focus because I have a hard time focusing. After I was accepted here, I had a lot of opportunities. The teachers helped me out one-on-one with learning, tutoring me, and they helped me out academically and personal. I moved around a lot, so I had a hard time trying to get to school and trying to get stuff for school, so they helped me with rides, and they helped me get stuff I needed. I started taking college classes so I can get my welder certificate. I'm the first in my family to get a certificate. I would actually recommend this program to anyone like me that's having a hard life or any other student, because this an amazing program that helps that just helps you. Right now, I am the head mechanic at a fabric place in Lysville, working 3rd shift. One of the teachers here actually helped me get an application from there and took it back for me to help me. But I really love to actually help students like me that grew up with hard lives and everything like that. I'll actually recommend this program to anybody. Thank you, and thank you for listening to my story.
Michael, I know you can't see us, but please know you have a room full of people just celebrating you and your success and your hard work. You're an inspiration to us, Michael, and thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Michael before we go to our next student? Because we do have time for questions, thanks to Rupin. Are any comments?
I do not have no questions, but thank you for asking.
You're so welcome, Carrie. Carrie, Michael. We're also going to see, Michael, if anybody here has a question for you, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Thank you. Yeah, Superintendent.
So, Michael, this is Mrs. Truitt. My question for you is, what happened after you filled out that application for that job? Did you have to go for an interview?
Yes, I went for an interview. I got a call while I was staying with my uncle up there in Lysville. I was staying at his house that day when I got a call, so he let me use his truck to ride over there.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then when you went to that interview, did you get the feeling that this was someplace that you would really want to work?
Yes.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
I just have a quick question. Michael, I want you to know that I have sat in the state board meeting room for a long, long time. I don't know that I've ever had tears in my eyes, but I do. My question to you, comment, not a question, but a comment. When you made the statement that you're the very first one in your family to have a certificate, how did that make your family feel?
They were very proud of me.
That says it all.
Michael, I'm curious about how you found, did someone, when you were in the 8th grade, did someone at your middle school suggest to you that you take a look at this, or how did it get on your radar?
The principal actually told me to come take a look, so I decided why not. So I was only about a 5-minute bike ride, so I hopped on a bike and rode down here to open house.
Well, we're glad you did, and it sounds like you're glad you did.
I am very glad I did.
We're very proud of you.
I want to point out a couple other things from Michael, what you shared. I'm so impressed with Ms. Decker and her entire team for really providing that holistic support that this morning we were talking about, the idea of when the family needed groceries or other supplies and support, that school rallied around you, Michael. And our early colleges do that beautifully, and that small environment allows them to do that. And all of that support with your just incredible motivation, Michael has just led you to success for you and your family. Thank you so much for visiting today.
Thank you.
Have a great night shift.
Good luck to you.
Okay, then, so that is a student, Michael is a student at one of our early colleges. We now have a student from Duplin County who also takes classes at James Sprunt. And so we are with Morgan Smith, our Career and College Promise Liaison, who works with both institutions to kind of make sure our students are on track. And then we have Latanya with us, Latanya Mason, who is going to share with us her experience. So take it away from here, Ms. Smith.
All right, again, as was just stated, my name is Morgan Smith. I'm the current CCP liaison with James Sprunt Community College. I have the absolute pleasure, of introducing Miss Latanya Mason. I actually started working with Latanya back in her 11th grade year. At that time, I was a career coach, so I was coming out to the schools and advising these students that were looking at potentially taking some of these Career and College Promise classes. So Latanya was a little bit confused as far as what she wanted to do with her life, so she was thinking she wanted to be a teacher. And I helped her set up some job shadowing opportunities. And since then, she has decided that she does, in fact, want to be a teacher, which praise God, because we are in desperate need of teachers right now. And so she is going to share with you her experience with CCP.
Hey, my name is Latanya Mason. I'm a senior at James Keenan High School. And CCP has been a great experience for me. I'm glad I took the opportunity to be a part of the program. Being a part of CCP, I got to do job shadowing in the kindergarten classroom, and being there made me realize that's what I wanted to do. CCP also gave me the opportunity to get some type of feel of what college will be like, and I'm glad that I got to get the feel of it before actually going to college next year. Glad I took CCP, was a part of the CCP program, because it took I saved some money for going to college, and
So what are you getting from CCP? What are you graduating with?
I'm graduating with my associate's degree and a certificate in elementary education.
Early childhood.
So,
Well, Morgan, that is just so exciting, Morgan. Let me tell you, I'm sorry, Latanya, let me tell you, I'm sure Jeff would have, our governor's advisor here was a kindergarten teacher. I know he would have loved to have had you in his classroom. And I know we have many people here who probably will be ready to hire you at any given point in time. Questions or comments for this incredible almost teacher here in North Carolina?
Latanya, where are you going to college?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Latanya, where are you going to college?
I would love to go to I will be attending A&T, North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University.
I don't know if you could hear that, Morgan, but you had a room full of people clapping for you. And lots of my Aggies here, lots of Aggies in the audience, so.
Latanya, this is Reggie Keenan from your hometown. We're very proud of you, and we definitely want you to stay in Duplin County, all right?
I'm working on talking her into that.
Any other questions?
Awfully proud of you, Latanya.
Thank you again so much for joining us, Latanya, and thank you so much to our incredible college liaison for being here. Y'all have
Thank
a
you.
great afternoon.
Thank you, you too.
You know, as you can see, Korean College Promise continues to be truly one of our pillars of excellence here in North Carolina. There are lots of other stories in the presentation and also in your thesis to read here. Just as a reminder, we continue to work towards developing better partnerships. Ruben, if you want to go ahead a couple, I'm very not going to get through those. Continue to really work with developing policies and practices, sharing some of these great ideas that create these incredible outcomes, right? To have a first-generation student whose family needed support and now he's able to provide, and a future teacher, it's just incredible. We continue to really be there as thought partners, but also as visionaries for these programs to keep pushing them, right, in their zone of development. Then to really help continuing this whole idea of post-secondary planning, as I know we will continue that work together as a state. The data stands clear, and the future is bright when it comes to career and college promise in our state.
Vice Chair.
Thank you for a great report, very uplifting. I want to go back to a part, I had a question on a part, back when you're talking about policy.
Yeah.
And part of the policy, if we get that slide, I think it was
11.
the other,
It's 11. There we go.
yeah,
Above.
back one.
Back. There we go.
Yeah, talked about responsibilities for program expenses. A big obstacle for students has been particularly by being able, not having the money to buy the books. Where are we on that now?
So I think it does vary. I will say over the last 10 years that I've been a part of this, I'm hearing anecdotally that is less of a barrier. Our districts are able to are working more with our colleges to have loaner programs, but also using more of their funds that are allocated to them to be able to provide to them. But I'm happy to do some more research in that and get that more clearly answered, Mr. Duncan.
That would be very helpful.
Sure.
I mean, I hate for that to become an obstacle for these students who have already got so many obstacles that we just learned about, to not be able to get to where they can get because of that impediment.
We have really been working hard with districts to kind of better understand how they're funded with this program, and encouraging them for the funds that they receive while these students are in college to be thinking about getting support staff for them, using that funding for the textbooks and the other support to alleviate some of that funding. So we have really made that an effort, but we will get some feedback and report back to you, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Campbell.
I would add transportation to that question. What does that look like? I mean, we heard about Michael hopping on his bike, but not everybody can do that.
Yeah, so I think for evening meetings, that of course varies. We hope that districts are providing, transportation to interest meetings or providing a virtual option. But for the school day, and Isaac, please correct me if I'm wrong, but most of our districts do provide transportation. And if not, because some of our colleges are farther from the high school, they are doing virtual, or some of our colleges come on site as well.
And one other question, I think it's slide 9, it's the one about earnings. I tried to make sense of that and couldn't, and just wondered, like, wages over what period of time, what does the wage figure mean?
I'm gonna get back to you on that. I tried to find that out yesterday. I'm gonna get back to you on that.
It really doesn't tell us much of anything.
Yeah, that blurb really does, and I apologize for that.
No, I know you didn't do it.
No, but I'm gonna get some more information for you. It was based on last year's data, and they looked at kind of what were the wages of the students with Department of Commerce, but I'm gonna get a little bit more information for you. Absolutely.
Chairman Blackmore,
Yes, sir.
whatever it is, $5,000 is not a bad figure.
That's right.
What it is.
That's right, that's right.
Uh,
That's right.
I mean, it's not a full quarter there, but I would like to know also. But But may I just close my remark by saying this? What we've heard today from these people, these young people, validates everything we have said about wraparound services and love for people to help them overcome any obstacle that's in their way. Those services is what that young man rode a bicycle. And don't tell me kids don't want to go to school. They want to go where they're loved, where they're supported, and see a goal in life. And I'm just thankful for him. Being a former welder, I know what he's making. I don't care what that's saying. And he is also a third shift supervisor. I know he can take care of wife, people, whomever.
He's supporting his whole family at
He
this
is
point.
supporting, and that's what it's all about. Giving our kids a goal in life and the resources to reach that goal and to do something for themselves. I'm proud of the guy. I'm proud of all welders, by the way.
Amen, Brother Hall, and I'll call it.
Amen.
To your point, I suspect that Michael was a student perhaps in the 8th grade that would not have been aware necessarily of this program because obviously his parents were, I'm not sure, they probably weren't aware. So to your point, the principal, someone in that school had Michael in mind and went to him and said, you should look at this. And that's all part of the
love.
And the connections and understanding who your students are.
Thank you all. Any other questions? Thank you, Sinead.
You're so welcome.
Told y'all it would feel good report, so. One last thing, we have a consent agenda item. It's a final evaluation of the Innovative School District 2016. The General Assembly passed legislation to create a non-geographic school district, and it was set in Robeson County, and it has now transitioned back to, so it is we no longer have an innovative school district. If anyone has any questions about that, Dr. Jordan and Dr. Korn are here to answer those questions. But suffice it to say that it was an attempt at trying to do something innovative, and we decided that we sunsetted this program. So, any questions? Mr. Chair, that completes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Blackburn. We'll now move to the Student Learning and Achievement Committee led by Ms. Jill Kamnitz. Ms. Kamnitz.
Thank you, Chair Davis. I work with Dr. Olivia Oxendine as a partner in the work of this committee. And as always, we start off with an item of new business, standards revisions updates.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to bring some updates today. Our first two slides are the same every month. It's just a reminder of our state board policy that guides our work, and then the next one is the internal procedures manual, where you can find more details about the process and the steps that we've been moving through. First, we had Healthful Living. Last month, we brought draft 2 for you to see, and the surveys were out. Those closed January 14th. So the next steps are to have DRC, the Data Review Committee, analyze the data and create a report, and then the writers will come back together and create a final draft 3 to bring to the board. Next, we have the arts. The arts SWT met and began work on their draft 2, so a little bit behind where Healthful Living is. The draft 2 survey will be released mid-February and will close mid-March. From there, OLR will organize the data, DRC will come together, do their thing with the data, create their report, and then the writers will create a draft 3. So seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with both of these areas. Next, we have world languages. This is the area that we are highlighting today. We are bringing draft 2 standards for you to take a look at. The survey was released earlier this month. It will close in early March, and it's the same cycle. OLR will organize the data, DRC will come back together, and then again the writers will come back together for light at the end of the tunnel for draft 3. So all 3 areas are coming closer to a draft 3, which is their final draft. For world languages, just as a reminder, the DRC report is based on the PSU stakeholder survey responses as 2 main sections, the qualitative and quantitative analysis, and then their conclusions and recommendations for possible revisions to the K-12 world language standards. The DRC, similar to the Healthful Living team, used standard deviation to decide that threshold of recommended changes, and then that report was given to the writers The next slide just gives a snapshot of two of the graphs. You're going to see novice below, so our world language standards and our proficiency levels. So this is novice below, and we had two surveys. One was the all stakeholder, and one was the PSU. And this particular question was around the overall percentage to remove, change, or keep requested within that proficiency level. So were they happy with the standards? Did they want to see changes? Did they want them removed? So the lighter color, the light pink, is the keep. So overall, you'll see that the data is showing that most were happy with those standards. Some areas for improvement, so they took a look at this, the qualitative data that told the story behind those graphs to come up with their recommendations. The next slide is just a snapshot of conclusions. These are just overall reactions, overall thinking from their group, overall impressions. They just talked a little bit about the comments were very positive, and then went into some of the recommendations were for clarifying wording or to address some vertical alignment. This is a look at their spreadsheet. The DRC spreadsheet and SWT spreadsheets look pretty much the same. You'll see that they're color-coded based on those data and their recommendations. So this just keeps them very organized. It helps us keep track of what they're looking at. In the middle, you've got the standard deviation information, and then comments and those percentages that were from the last surveys. This was their working document. Some trends and themes from this DRC report. Overall, the majority of responses indicated a satisfaction with the new structure and the new strands. They appreciated the vertical alignment between the proficiency levels, which included some descriptions of language. And you'll see in the chart that the number of standards and objectives have definitely decreased. So they decreased the number of objectives and standards. They consolidated and they removed duplicated content to make sure everything was more concise and streamlined for teachers and students. Some other comments requested clarifications on key terms, whether that should be within the standard or objective, or if they would like to see that within the support document. So our team is making note of that when we get into installation and what those support documents look like. Next slide, we have the seniors writing team. They began work in mid-December, worked for a little over a month. They used the conclusions and recommendations from the DRC report. They worked in teams, so they looked at the standards by groups of standards, and they also looked by strands. You'll see the strands over to the side there, and then program types. We have lots of different program types across the state, so they made sure to take a look at that. And you'll note that dual language immersion is a part of the world language standards, so that was one of the program types that they took a look at. They engaged in conversations to update those proficiency outcomes to make sure the rigor was on point with what the comments and the feedback they received from the field. And they're still working on the names of the strands. They've actually flipped interdisciplinary literacy on that first strand, and then they added communities in the second one, so intercultural community connections. So we're gonna, just to make sure that it's on point, they are continuing their work up and through draft 3. And then these next two slides just give two snapshots. You have the full document as well as the DRC report in your materials. This is just an example of a draft 2 standard. So novice low standard, and you can notice some of the words with interact and negotiate meaning for the standard, and then how the objectives feed into that standard with express, provide information. And then the next one is just another look at an intermediate mid. Again, you've got one standard and 2 objectives. I'm talking about identifying the main idea and key information, and then comparing within that same objective. All right.
Any questions for Dr. Day? Vice Chair Dunn.
I again want to thank you and your colleagues for the work you're doing. This is a remarkable amount of standards work being done all at once at different levels, and your reports are always really very good and helpful and concise, and so helpful. I realized I need a remedial course on one thing. The Office of Learning and Recovery is organizing the data, and I certainly know that the Office of Learning and Recovery. I'm not quite sure I understand what organizing means versus the DRC. I'm not sure who that group is at this point who's analyzing the data and exactly what they're doing. Could you give me a refresher on that, please?
Sure, yes. The Office of Learning and Recovery takes all of our raw data and puts it in graphs for us, bar graphs, whatever educator groups working on this. And the DRC, they go through and comb through all that data, the percentages, the graphs, and take a look and make those conclusions and recommendations from that.
Thank you for that.
Yes, Dr. Oxford.
Thank you very much. Again, yes, ditto my colleague, lots of hard work and effort and thinking going into this. Refresh my memory on this. I believe that the language of the Eastern Band Cherokee, is it recognized as part of the body of courses in world languages?
It is. So our standards are built on proficiency levels, not individual languages, but that is a language that is taught across our state.
It would not be subject to anything related to standards though, right? In terms of, does the department try to capture that language in any kind of standards formatting?
No, not necessarily that particular language. It's more applied to the proficiency levels if they're teaching that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll think about it some more.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Day. We have one action on first read. SLA 1 is the State Board of Education Policy Amendment, Parental Hearing Concern Hearings Procedure. Mr. Landis.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. Before you is a proposed amendment to PRNT 001, our Parental Concerns Hearings Procedure. This is to ensure consistency between our policy with the rule. I'm happy to tell you all that the rule that you approved last month that Ryan Collins brought to you was approved today by the Rules Review Commission. And this is just to add those parts of the rule into our policy that we did not have before. The previous edition of the policy was passed back in November. So like I said, we just want to ensure consistency between the rule and policy. Two additions to the policy are the definitions section. This is really just a copy and paste from the rule, as well as the jurisdictional review aspect of the policy that's also in the rule. One small difference here that I want to point out to you is that in the rule, we state that will be done, the review of the initial intake for these concerns will be done by the state board or its designee. Here we have filled in designee with the Office of General Counsel. We'll review that, and if we determine that the board has jurisdiction, appoint a hearing officer from there. With that, those are all the changes we have, and happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
One action item, SLA 2, is another State Board of Education Policy Amendment, 9th grade students accelerated preparation for college entry. We discussed this last month, and again, this is an alignment issue, I think, and Ms. Shackelford, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to add in case you're hearing from your superintendents. I mean, there are lots of questions coming up. I met with a group the other morning, 35 of them, and I think for the most part, this policy feels good. There are some additional questions that are kind of coming up that I may come back and add to this just to help ensure things are really clear. I think people are curious as to what this will take, right, over the next several years, and hope that students who can benefit from this do so, but that it doesn't have unintended consequences.
I'll just ditto that I also met with a group of superintendents on another topic, and they asked specifically about this particular policy and how it will impact how they can prepare to message what can we provide them as they look at what the locals have put in place with regards to graduation requirements and the trajectory of what will be required, what will be local discretion, et cetera, that sort of thing as we move forward, and having some clarity as soon as DPI has it around how they're headed towards looking at this so they can be communicated with them in time to be able to work with their boards prior to decisions being made.
I think we're still hopeful that there may be some adjustments in that short session.
Well, this is different.
Yeah.
than
It is.
the other.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So this is,
I'm not understanding.
Superintendent, would you like to explain?
No, go ahead.
Okay,
It's,
so there's two things. So this is and this is also where we're having to continue to remind people. So there is the issue of a local district not being able to add additional requirements
For graduation.
4-year. In that same law, this was passed that a student should have an option to graduate with a 3-year pathway.
Yeah.
This 3-year pathway is not going, and to our knowledge, is not going anywhere. It's the 4-year or earlier, the idea of not being able to add local requirements, that we're very hopeful, and I confirmed with Mr. Falkenberg yesterday, we're still hopeful that that will get removed. So, I'm having to keep it straight in my head, and it's not easy either, so.
I think I didn't ask my question very clearly. Anyway, any other questions about this? All right, then this would be something we'll be voting on tomorrow. Thank you for all the work on it that you did on this, Ms. Shackelton. I know it was a lot in a short period of time.
Thank you.
One discussion item, SLA 3, another State Board of Education policy amendment to use the state designated assessments for the North County teacher evaluation process. And this is a CTE question, Mr. Michael.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you. So just some very quick history on Perkins so that I can set the stage. The Carl D. Perkins Vocational and Technical Education Act was authorized first in 1984. It was reauthorized in 1990, called Perkins 2. NC instituted the VOCATS, which was the Vocational Competency Assessment and Tracking System, which was effectively 100-item multiple choice test for all courses at that time. I actually taught under that, so I'm feeling a little old today. And I'll tell you, I brought this up so I could see my notes because I didn't know if I'd be able to see them up there. So Perkins 3 was reauthorized in 1998. Perkins 4, 2006. And under these, we continued with the 100-item multiple choice test as what we reported to the federal government of our indicator of performance. So in 2018, Perkins 5 allowed us to have flexibility about, we really went under measures of program quality measures, different people call them different things. So NC State, or North Carolina's state plan, requires NC to report on credential attainment, performance-based measurements, or CTE state assessments. And we call all of these, we put them all under one umbrella called proofs of learning. So our current statistics are up on the board there. We have 87 credentials used as a proof of learning. You'll hear more about those later today. We have 48 performance-based measurements as proofs of learning, and only 37 CTE state assessments as proofs of learning. So what we're seeking today is a policy revision to the use of state designated assessments to accommodate the implementation of credential and certification exams and performance-based measurements. These proof of learnings are completed throughout the course in many cases, rather than at the conclusion of the course. Additionally, they serve as the assessment or proof of learning in lieu of a traditional operational assessment, which is typically a multiple choice test. And why we believe this is important is that in some cases we have heard that some districts have interpreted that they must hold really hard and fast to the 5 and 10 day rule and to the final exam language in this policy. So we're seeking to simply have that clarity so that districts can operate the way that the federal law intends for them to do so. And if I may share just one very quick story about a child that was impacted by this that I learned on Friday night. One of my soccer players took a blow to the head, and I was concerned about a concussion. So I started asking him questions. And the last question, which I already knew the answer, was, are you ready for your final exams next week? Knowing that he'd already had his exams, just checking for clarity. And he said, oh, I've already done all my exams. I had this exam, that exam, and the other exam, but I didn't have to take an exam in my Microsoft class because I'd already earned my credentials. This is a 9th grader in one of our public schools here in Wake County Public Schools, and he was so proud of that, and he went on to sell me on the notion and the value of credentials. And I thought, and you know, he just knows me as a soccer coach, right? That's all I am to this young man. And so he got done. And I just looked at him, I said, Preston, I said, I know a little bit about that, because I work on that, and sometime when we're in between games, we'll have a conversation. So I just thought that was a cool situation. So,
Thank you for that, Danny. That was great. Any questions about this? All right.
I just have one, just real quick.
Yes.
If I saw correctly in the policy, it applies to not just taking the assessment, but to the 20% of the final grade as well.
Yes, ma'am. And the rationale for that is, again, this isn't just one shot.
Yeah.
We want, especially with performance-based measurements, we want a complete picture of how the student performs. We want teachers to be engaged in that child improving performance throughout the semester or the year, not just being done and moving on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one consent item. SLA 4 is middle school introduction to computer science elective courses requirements. As we all know, there is a new legislative requirement that each PSU shall offer an elective introductory computer science course in middle school. And much as we received the listing last month for the high schools, this is the listing of courses that fulfill in middle schools. And it was quite a lot. The number was
23 courses.
the 23 different courses that can fulfill that
That require,
elective
so,
in middle school.
yes. And the list is included at the bottom of the agenda items. And so these are already existing courses that are in our course inventory that schools will be able to use to implement to satisfy this portion of that now law.
Right. Any questions? Thank you so much. And that concludes the SLA committee's work today.
Thank you, Ms. Kamnitz. We'll now take a short break and return at 2:40. Good afternoon. We're back in session, and our final committee of the day is the Business Operations Committee, led by Vice Chair Alan Duncan. Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you, Chair Davis. Along with John Blackburn, we lead the Business Operations Committee, and we have several items today. Our first one on action on first read is approval of a contract for over $500,000. It's the AS400 IBMI Migration and Managed Services contract. I believe Barry Pace is here to say a few words about it. And there he is. This is an extension till February 1 of 2027, and we'll have 2 optional one-year extensions beyond that.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the board and Superintendent. So, as you are aware, SAS Institute currently hosts the Public School District AS400s that is used for financial and HR purposes. SAS no longer wishes to perform that hosting and managed services past July 1st of 2024. So we reached out to our partner at DIT, who has a contract with Insono for mainframe as a service. And we worked through the approval process to amend that contract to incorporate a statement of work for Insono to migrate the public school unit AS400s. And so the cost of the project at $1.21 million in year 1 and $1.461 million in year 2 and 3 represents a cost savings of at least a couple $100,000, almost $400,000 in year 1, and who knows what a 10% or 15% increase might be proposed by SAS if we, were forced to continue that service beyond July 1st. So a lot of effort and partnership between the 2 agencies to get to this point, and we're eager to get your approval on this, and hopefully signatures from the Insono representative tomorrow night or Friday morning, and Superintendent Friday afternoon, and Secretary Weaver on Monday, and procurement is ready to facilitate those, and I'm prepared to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Pace?
How much longer, Mr. Chairman, is the AS400 going to be around?
That's a good question, Mr. Pace.
I thought that was antique.
So we still have 40 districts using it in production today. About 38 of those using it for HRMS, which is DPI's HR application. It's been around for many decades. And about 31 districts using it for SunPac financials. SunPac is now owned by Sylogist Ed. So Serenic is now Sylogist Ed. And they are in the process of piloting with Durham. They've announced that they would like all of their customers to migrate off of SunPac to Sylogist Ed or some other product by July 1st, 2026. However, I feel that is a very aggressive timeline. And of course, we have 38 districts still using HRMS in production. So ideally, by the end of the 5 years of this contract, but realistically, with those numbers, it's more likely to be into the decade. So I just want to be realistic on the time frame. Winston-Salem Forsyth is, implementing Tyler Munis, and they're one of the customers here that we're talking about, right? But so their go live for the financials is January 1st, 2025. Their go live for HR payroll is January 1st, 2026. So you can see the time frames that are being put into place where they can do, 3 full months of full pro forma every employee payroll testing, and things before go live.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pace, appreciate it.
Thank you.
As you can tell from the 40 districts that are still relying on this, this is something that has to be done. And there were significant negotiations that have been going on to keep the price at a reasonable place. I want to thank the people with efforts on that. So, all right, our BizOp 2 item is our next action on first read, which is the approval of 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant. This is cohort 17. This is the RFP for the applications. Susan Brigman, I hope is here by video today.
Yes, sir. I'm here. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome. And we're pretty familiar with these, and so there's a lot of information. She's not going to cover all of it, just the things that there are some differences or changes, and she's going to try to highlight those for us as we go through. So Susan, please take it away.
Yeah, so if you guys just bear with me, I'm under the weather, and I'm going to try to get through this without coughing too much. But just as Vice Chair Duncan said, this is nothing new. We come to you every time with the 21st Century RFP proposals. The purposes of the grant have not changed, so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that slide. So if you want to go ahead and move, and our entities that can apply for these funds is very broad as usual, and that's all dictated in the law. One thing that I do want to draw your attention to is this slide for good standing. We've consulted with legal to make sure that we are being good stewards of these 21st Century dollars. We've had some issues this year and in some previous years where we've had to terminate grant programs, or we have some programs that have not been able to resolve findings in a timely manner and things of that nature. And so our good standing language has been updated just a little bit to make sure that when applicants are applying for these funds, that this part will be reviewed in level 2 by DPI staff. We want to make sure that if there were any program or fiscal monitoring review findings or question costs, that they've addressed those. If they've had any issues with the Office of the State Auditor, and if they are currently receiving funds from us, or have within the last 3 grant cycles, so cohort 14, 15, or 16, they must have scored low or moderate for at least 2 of the 3-year grant cycles on our annual programmatic and fiscal risk assessments. Additionally, if they have been terminated by NCDPI, they are considered not in good standing, and they cannot apply for another grant for 2 consecutive grant cycles. So, and our grant cycles are 3 years, so basically that's 6 years. That's what we're proposing with this new language. Okay. One other thing that is new, we have, you saw this, we brought this to you about pre-K with our summer enhancement grant. This is something new. We are adding pre-K as an option. We've worked extensively with Carla Garrett with the Serve Center and getting a really good understanding of pre-K across North Carolina and a lot of the deficits there where there are so many kids on waiting lists that don't have any type of after-school care. And so we are offering this particular type of program only to LEA or PSUs that are currently operating a pre-K program. So your NC pre-Ks, Title I pre-K, Exceptional Children, or Head Start. They can serve students in pre-K in the after-school program as well. But again, this is not for any of our non-governmental units. We also taken into a lot of feedback that we've received from the field, and also I've been in consultation with other states that manage 21st Century grant programs, and USAID does not mandate a specific number of hours per day for grant programming in North Carolina. Since the inception of 21st Century, we have always encouraged grantees to have at least 12 hours per week of programming. But what we have found is that in our rural areas, this kind of puts a constraint on them. Their travel time for getting kids home was way too late. And so what we're proposing is to continue with 50 students at least as a minimum, but operating a minimum of 300 student contact hours during the out of school time period, just for the academic school year, instead of saying it has to be 12 hours per week. Because we do know that some school districts, they they do need some flexibility with scheduling to make sure that they can get students into their programs and not getting them home so late. We also want to make sure that programs are serving students by October 15th each year during this 3-year grant cycle. We have been really working hard with our grantees to stress the urgency of them beginning this programming in a timely manner and not waiting several weeks into the school year to even get started. So we're proposing that October 15th is when they would have to be in operation. Not going to spend a lot of time here. We have recently, as a 21st Century State team, working with USAID, we have looked at our program performance goals, and these are what we use to send out and gather information from our grantees to conduct our annual evaluation, which is a requirement for us through USAID, is that we have to report out on performance goals. And so we have really spent some time going through those and making sure that they're aligned with what we need to be collecting to be in compliance with USAID as well. And so I did attach, you should have received a document that goes into the specifics of each one of these goals for your review. We've also provided a list of information for all of our grantees in this RFP that we want to make sure that they are providing academic services in at least 2 core academic areas per grade span. So your pre-K centers, we have looked at everything should be aligning to the North Carolina Foundations for Early Learning and Development. And then our K-12 centers, we want to see their literacy programming, their math programming, and their science programming really align to what their feeder school districts and schools are developing at the local level, so that we can make sure that what we are doing in 21st Century is truly supporting what's being done during the regular school day. And for enrichment, we're also proposing that centers should offer some type of two areas of enrichment services, because the law and the language in the law does say it should be, a variety. So we want to make sure that they're at least offering 2 different options for enrichment and not just a single type of service. And so you'll just see some examples and things that they will be able to pull from for those areas of enrichment as well. Family engagement is a huge component of 21st Century, and what we were finding is that parents, were expressing to us that there were not as many educational workshops being offered across the state that they felt were beneficial. And so we wanted to make sure that our grantees host at least 3 educational workshops annually for families, so it's quarterly basically. We wanted to have some type of requirement in here for the number of educational workshops, because across the state we were seeing a lot of variety. Some might do 2 workshops a year, some were doing 1, some were doing 6 or 7. And so we wanted to at least have a good minimum for folks to be prepared to provide. And so the first one would need to be something to help them understand the importance of school day attendance. Another workshop should address social, emotional, and positive academic behaviors. And then another workshop to help parents gain skills and knowledge to support the academic needs, especially in literacy across our state. Summer programming is still optional with 21st Century. The regular school year is mandated, but you can also choose to operate a summer program. And this time they can propose to do summer learning for what we call a standard summer learning program, and I'll explain that just a little bit more on the next slide, or they can choose to do an intensive, shorter type summer learning program. So if on the next slide, you'll see standard, what we're talking about is what we typically see in the summer is they're operating at least 5 consecutive weeks for at least 4 days per week, and they're offering at least 3 hours of core academic learning per day and a variety of enrichment opportunities that are really aligned to those statewide performance goals, especially objectives 3.1 and 3.2. And then for summer intensive, we have piloted this with our summer enhancement grant that we have with that Bipartisan Safer Communities Act funds. And so we wanted to continue this as an option for programs if they did not feel they could run a 5-week program, but would like to focus on a 2 to 3 week with targeted interventions. And those are our transition type programs for kindergartners to pre-K, 5th grade to 6th, 8th to 9th, intensive tutoring or credit recovery, or those comprehensive mental health supports. As with all of our grants, the priority, the absolute priority has to be given to those applicants that are proposing to serve students in Title I schools. So that has not changed. Our competitive priority points for this particular competition includes the joint applicants, CSI, TSI feeder school designations. So if they're proposing to serve students that are in CSI and TSI schools, they can receive priority points for that. We're also looking at chronic absenteeism because we recognize that is still a huge issue across our state. And so if they can receive priority for that if they're above 51% of their feeder schools have higher rates of chronic absenteeism when they're compared to the state. And then our last two competitive priority points deals with the distress rankings, which you're accustomed to. So our tier designations, and then also underserved counties, because we're continuing to try to make sure that these funds are equitably dispersed across the state. The funding levels, what we are proposing is that we increase the funding level, the total amount from $400,000 to $500,000, and doing a lot of research through the Service Center and with the U.S. Department of Ed. We're actually kind of on the low end on what we have been offering, and the $500,000 will be more beneficial for our school districts, especially those that are larger. It's very difficult to operate very many centers across a district with 400,000, but 500 is our cap. So we're going to propose to at least raise it to the 500,000. And our program funding levels, this is new. We have actually, you've seen these levels in summer enhancement grants from us for the past several grant competitions, and those have actually worked very well for us. And so we did spend a lot of time doing some research on this, and we have calculated these levels. The base cost of 50 students for 300 hours. We utilize the full cost estimates per age level of students served provided by the Wallace Foundation's The Cost of Quality Out-of-School Time Programs study, and then we adjusted the numbers to September 2023 using the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, their CPI inflation calculator. So we did take into account inflation in calculating these ranges. And then we also utilized the 2022 average cost per regular attendee in a 21st century program that was provided by the After School Alliances report. And all of that is referenced in our RFP, just so that you have an idea of where we came up with these ranges. The optional summer learning level are the same that you have already approved in past competitions, so those have not changed for summer. And then our quality review scores, for this competition, these are the ranges from the rubric. So any applicants that fall into these three bands, excellent, strong, or average, will be considered for funding based on how much we have available. But applicants that fall into weak or unacceptable, of course, are not considered for funding regardless of their state board region. One other change that we are proposing is that for our installments of our funds, we typically, the 34%, and 32% that you see on the screen is, in the past, has been their total grant award, so inclusive of summer. But what we are proposing is that the academic year funding installments are based on their school year data and not inclusive of summer. This way, because they're getting two separate pots of money, one that's very specific for school year and one that is considered for summer, the academic year funding installments should be based on that actual attendance data from the school year. And so we're proposing that they receive those installments for just regular school year. And then on the next slide, you'll see our summer funding installment. We would push those out as a one lump sum right around April, so that they can have those monies to prepare for summer. And one reason that we really want to move in this direction is that we get to summer and we've had a lot of issues with some programs saying, well, I've already spent all my money, I don't have my summer money. And so we are really trying to make sure that if they are being funded to provide summer programming, that they actually have reserved the funds to do so. If at any time programs are not meeting requirements for second and third installments, whether it be for the school year or if they're not meeting the numbers for their summer program, we can ask for them to take a reduction of funds each year. So that still remains the same. One final thing that we are wanting to add in as a requirement is that any awarded organizations would attend our onboarding so that they have a clear understanding of what's in our grant guidance document. In the past, these types of meetings have been optional. We have not pressed the issue, but with seeing the many issues that we've had with some of the programs, we want to make sure that when folks come on board with us, that they really have a good understanding of what the requirements of this grant are. So we are asking that that be made mandatory, and that if they do not attend, that they may be required to forfeit their grant. And we will continue with annual continuation applications, and this is just to make sure that what they're saying that they're going to do with the grant money is what they are doing, and that we'll approve them each year for the 3 years. And then you will see our competition timeline there. That kind of gives you an overview of where we are in the competition, when funds will be dispersed, based on if this RFP is approved for us to go ahead and move forward. Our first item would be the letter of intent. We will get that posted February 2nd if this is approved.
All right,
Okay?
thank
Are there any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Susan. That, as you can see, this would not, we're being asked to authorize this going out for applications, would not come back to us for final approval till July 11th. Are there any questions on this?
I have
Dr.
a,
Eisenstein.
yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Susan. I do have a question about the, does the U.S. Department of Education, that where this grant resides, is there any required outcomes required of the grantees, the recipients of the grant? In other words, would something like proving or showing, demonstrating gains in academic performance?
Yes, ma'am. We have to report on that to them every year. All of our data, all of the school data, we have the Service Center works with us to develop our program evaluation, and we do look at how many students have increased their proficiencies and things like that. And that is part of those performance goals that you can see as an attachment. And that's exactly what we measure the growth of our grantees on, and we actually send that information on to US Ed.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Ms. Brigman.
Thank you.
We now have Dr. Lynn Harvey to present the Happy News Supply Chain Assistance Funds. A little over $35 million, and we've been fortunate to have this for the last few years where we have had real supply chain issues. If you want to share the happy news.
Always happy to do that, to
Very
share
good.
good news for our statewide school nutrition program. And USDA, in their effort to continue to support our school nutrition programs, is issuing another round, the fourth round of supply chain assistance funds. This round is an amount of $35 million, which brings us to a total of $102 million over the past 2 years. That amount is clearly reflective of what's happening in our diminished domestic supply chain where the K-12 marketplace is concerned. Not only are products unavailable, but those, when they are available, are very costly. So I think you'll join me in expressing our gratitude to the U.S. Department of Agriculture for continuing to keep their fingers on the pulse of what's happening in states relative to the need for cash to support food purchases. This couldn't come at a better time because we're in desperate need of utilizing the most nutritious, high-quality foods available. Now, the only limitation in the use of these funds is that they must be used for fresh agricultural products, locally grown ideally. No processed foods are available. The goal is to keep the nutrition standard as high as possible and the food quality as high as possible. I'm especially excited about this because we do have in the department now a farm-to-school grant where we're working directly to connect local school districts with local growers, not just agribusiness, but small local farms, literally connecting them one to the other, one to the back door, if you'd say, or to the back dock, as we should say, in the school nutrition environment, and that's working quite nicely for us. We want to overcome as many barriers as possible to enable those small growers to come into the school nutrition environment. We also recognize that the timing is such that it is a complex environment, and our school nutrition professionals are doing all they can to continue to make school meals as appealing and nutritious and affordable to students as they possibly can. This continues to be a challenge for them because they too face a variety of issues, including staff shortages, yet they continue to approach their jobs in a manner that reminds them every day that their job is about nourishing bodies, minds, and souls of the students they serve. Fortunately, the distribution model for these funds is established in federal regulation. It's pretty simple that any school food authority in good standing in North Carolina is eligible to receive funding. All will receive a base allocation of $5,000. The remaining allocation is based upon ADM as of October of '22. Again, that's statutorily determined. That means that we have 211 school food authorities to receive the funds this year. This includes our traditional public schools, our charter schools, residential schools, and non-public schools. An attestation form is required of the school district indicating the funds will be used for only this purpose. We've not had anyone say otherwise thus far. We wouldn't expect anything beyond that. So the proposed allocation is available for you in your packet, and we respectfully request that you consider our recommendation and move forward. As Susan said earlier, we're ready to roll with the money on February 2nd if we get the thumbs up and the approval from you. And I also want to say to each of you, we thank you for your continued support of the school nutrition programs. We're so proud of the work that takes place in North Carolina. Our students, I think, are benefiting every day from the nutritious products available to them and the warm and accepting environment they receive when they go into our school dining rooms. So thank you all for that continued support.
Thank you for that happy report. And
Always happy to do so.
This is a good time to stop and thank all our nutrition workers around the state for the excellent work they do to try to keep our children with nutritious food and well-fed. And we've already heard a couple of stories today about how important that's been for students. So, and we can hear stories any meeting we hold, truthfully. So thank you for the work that's being done, and thank you for your leadership in that area.
Thank you. We have a remarkable team at DPI, and we appreciate the privilege to serve.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Dr.
My
Hartman.
pleasure.
And now brings us to a policy amendment for professional certification of finance officers, and Alexis Schaus will guide us through this pretty straightforward policy change. This may be the most straightforward one we've ever had from your department.
Perhaps, yes. So, good afternoon. So this is bringing forward the FINO-000. It is the state board policy over the certification requirements for a finance officer. In the last session, in the appropriations bill, there was an addition requiring all employees and LEAs involved in making or administering contracts that they are to complete a minimum of 2 hours of training related to conflict of interest. So the recommendation here is to include that requirement. This only applies to finance officers, but to include that requirement and explicitly state that it can be part of their minimum of 24 hours a year of CPEs that they are required to do as part of their certification. Vice Chair Duncan also requested that I provide kind of a follow-up on the changes that the board approved related to the experience and education of finance officers. Not so many months ago, we recommended that we increase the education requirement for, I don't know if it's increased, make it more accounting specific, as well as increase the education the experience requirement from 3 years to 5 years of financial operation experience, not just business experience. And to kind of, we're seeing the impact of that change over the last 6 months or so. And I would say that noticeably, we do still have approximately 10 vacancies in our finance officers, and some of that are finance officers kind of moving around from one to another, some leaving the field or retiring. That is down from, we were, I think, at a peak of over 15 vacancies. But more importantly, the change that the board made to the interim status of a finance officer and providing a longer period of time with the approval of the CFO, if they are actively recruiting a finance officer, to have that interim period longer. What that has allowed is for some assistant finance officers to take their accounting courses. These people, the experience is harder to find than, or harder to make up than the accounting knowledge. And so we are seeing, and included in your materials today in consent, a finance officer that was an assistant finance officer, had the experience, did not have that accounting education. She has taken her classes. She is now being presented to the board as for certification as a finance officer. And I do think that it is the increase in the requirement. We are seeing more people being successful in the positions, and overall, I do believe that it is a benefit to the school districts.
Well, thank you for that additional report, because I know the board has been interested in how that policy, after it went through, how it's working in operation. So appreciate you keeping us updated on that. Any questions on the actual voting item, which is the change to policy? As promised, it really is one of the easiest ones we've had to deal with.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. We now have Biz Op 5, our last item on first read. Dr. Charles Aiken is here to present on a $1 million robotics grant proposal. And
yes, sir. Good afternoon. I actually have the honor of being here to talk about some good news. Again, I don't quite have Ms. Shaw Coltrane's extroversion, but I promise you that I have it on the inside. So here today to talk about two aspects. First is the most recent grant application review process as outlined in the most recent budget, and then also to provide the board just an update on how the grant process has been working, impacts on our students. So you'll probably recognize a lot of this for those who were here prior when we first did this grant process. This particular review cycle was provided based on funding, as Vice Chair Duncan outlined in the most recent budget. It's $1 million of ESSER III funding. The legislative purpose stayed the same. This was basically a renewal of a program outlined in the budget legislation from 2021. The timeline is on the screen here. This is what we followed. This was also prescribed in the legislation. It is a compressed timeline. I do want to just take a moment, and I really want to thank and tell the appreciation for all of our staff, the teachers, directors, superintendents at the PSU level who worked very tirelessly to get these applications written in a very short timeline. And then I also want to take a moment and thank all of our colleagues at the department for getting together at a very quick notice to review these. I mentioned it later, but I think it's worth noting, every application was reviewed by every member of the review team, and that took time. I want to thank Mr. Howard Ginsberg. He is our K-12 integrative STEM specialist. He's my right hand. And I do want to take a moment to thank Mr. Fafario and Lou for their patience as I tried to get this presentation done in time. They were very sweet and very kind in that process. So thank you to everyone who made it happen. We again followed a very similar process. Request for proposal was sent out to all PSUs to follow, which outlined the legislative requirements for what the grant could and could not do. I think the next slide is, so one thing, this also stayed the same as prescribed in legislation. If an applicant chose to use some of their money to partner with a third party vendor, there were specific requirements for what that robotics partner needed to be able to do. That wasn't a requirement that you had to, but if you chose to, these were the requirements for what you needed to make sure you established. So the review process, just some notes. Overall, we received 46 applications with a request of $2 million in funding for the $1 million that we had available. We used the interagency team, as I mentioned. And then the rubric was utilized, which was already published in the request for proposal, broke down into these 5 areas that you see on the screen. These were basically continuations of last time. Within the budget, there were some expectations to make sure they outlined specifically what they were going to be doing. We did look for reasonableness and necessary funds. And then, of course, because this is federal, we did make sure we put in there some language to make sure that districts are expected to ensure there's no supplanting that occurs. So we also shared with any of the PSUs targeted areas for consideration. These maintained were the same from last time. The only thing that we did a little bit different this time was we did indicate to applicants that we would give some priority to those applicants that were not able to receive funding the first time around. So overall, we were able to award or recommend to the board awarding 22 of the 46 applications for exactly $1 million of the $1 million. Those recommendations cover recipients from all 8 state board region areas, 20 LEAs and 2 charters. And based on the applications, potentially reaching as many as 1,900 students. And to provide the board a little bit of background, this is kind of the breakdown of where the applications came from regionally, and how many we were able to recommend for awarding in each of those areas, and the total dollar figures. And then we also included a quick map just to kind of, I think, drive home the point that the interest comes from across the entire state. And this was something that we continue to be impressed with, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about sort of later in the presentation. And then the board's been provided the specific recommendations, the PSU, their location, and the specific amount that they have requested. And that's the next several slides. Again, the total was exactly $1 million of the $1 million we've been given. So the other thing we wanted to provide the board an update on is the most recent state budget does require the department to provide information on how the grant is being implemented and impacts on students. And so just some of the things that I really wanted to highlight for the board. So the first is that over the last 2 budget cycles, we've been given about $2.6 million in funding. We have received over $8 million in requests. We've also received 111 applications during this process, and that comes from over 80 different PSUs. So I think we can say that the interest and desire is absolutely there. We have applications from all 8 state board regions covering all grade spans, and it definitely includes both LEAs and charters, so it is not a narrow band of interest by any stretch of the imagination. So this might be a little bit difficult to see. What I was wanting to do is kind of share with the board. This is specific to the first grant cycle. You see on the left the first year, which obviously was now fully completed, the 22-23 school year. And then on your right, you see where we are so far in the 23-24 school year. Just some things that have struck me in this process that I wanted to share. So we've talked a lot about the importance of getting students engaged and interested in STEM at an early age. And I think when you see this, you see the number of elementary schools and the number of elementary teams that have been directly impacted by this grant. It's amazing. And in particular, there are 75 elementary teams that were created directly because of this grant. The other thing you see is the number of students in both years that have been involved in this, the number of staff that are participating in this. It truly does touch a wide variety of students and staff. You will notice there's a slight decline in the number of schools, the number of teams, and I'm going to speak to that and some of the challenges that the districts shared with us. So one of the other things that we asked is districts were required to share with us highlights and how they are doing in meeting the goals that they put forward in their initial application. And I won't read all of these, but I think when you kind of look at what the trend was, there were several that really came through. So first was the engagement in STEM is absolutely happening for our students. A second one would be, we've been talking about the Portrait of a Graduate and the importance of the durable skills. And A significant number of the districts and charter schools reported back that they are seeing that students are working together, they are collaborating, they're having to think critically as they try to problem solve through the challenges that these competitions require. And you also see just an increase in engagement in school and instruction in general, and that's exactly what we wanted to see happen for our students. We also did ask, what challenges may be keeping them from achieving fully some of the goals they outlined. And this is where we see a little bit, I think, of some of the things that may have happened in year 2. So several of them talked about just changes in school and district leadership, just trying to keep and follow through, and that could be at the principal level, at the staff level, in the classrooms, even directors who may have been responsible. When you have that gap and you lose a little bit of that historical knowledge, it just takes a little bit to get going. I know we talked about transportation a little bit in some of the earlier presentations. This is specifically written to be an after-school robotics program. So there's been some challenges there. I think districts were using some of the funds to try to work with that, but that did come up. Scheduling conflicts, a lot of the kids are in a lot of different things. So the schools, sometimes meeting after school or getting to the competitions could be a challenge. We did hear sometimes about just trying to keep that continuity of the coaches and the mentors and volunteers coming in. In some of our schools, depending on where they're located, that was a bit of a challenge. And then just concerns about future funding, some reluctance necessarily to put too much into this if they didn't know for sure where the future of the funding might come from. So to sort of pull this together, I don't have a student. Next time I will make sure that I meet Sneha's bar that she just set for all of us, and I'll make sure I have someone here. But I think this quote to me sums up, and this was a response in one of the grant check-ins that we required. I think this drove it home. And to me, and I am going to read this one just because I think it really speaks to it. But the question was just, tell us about how it's going and how you're doing. And the response was, perhaps the most rewarding outcome has been the palpable excitement among our students. The grant-funded program sparked genuine enthusiasm for learning, evident in the increased engagement, participation, and a newfound curiosity. And I think back to the young man and the young lady we had earlier talking, that's, I think, what we want every curricular and extracurricular program to do. So I just wanted to kind of end on that to summarize where I think the after-school robotics program has taken us so far. And I'll end on that and open myself up for any questions.
You did as well as you could without having a student prop. But we do love seeing students, so you're right about that. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, sir.
Kim.
I just have one question. The numbers look amazing. Do we have any data on subgroup participation, like students of color, students with disabilities, multilingual learners? Do we know who these kids are? Because I think that could be, equity should always be in the part of what we do, but particularly around STEM and growing, and maybe even in terms of like other funds that we could access if that becomes part of the focus.
That is a great question. We look for it in the grant narrative, but I don't have that data up front. I think that is something that we could ask our participants to give us. I think that's a great point.
This is really funny because yesterday I just got a reminder about Haywood County Schools starting a robotics club. And then I come here today and I'm like, wow, no wonder they're starting a robotics club because they got some money for it. So I think it's really cool, especially coming from a more rural county, that this is, that there's money for this specifically, because at least in Haywood County there is almost, no emphasis on robotics clubs. Like my cousins in Charlotte, travel for competitions for robotics. So it's really cool that there's so many different counties and demographics that are being met through this funding.
See, I did have a student here. I planted that.
Waiting, lying in wait.
The opportunity.
No, it's there. Thank you for sharing that, actually. It's very cool. I appreciate that.
All right, any questions or comments? Dr. Aiken. Thank you for your enthusiastic report. I'm glad to have this grant.
Thank you.
All right, that then moves us to our discussion items. BizOp 6 and 7 are really related. BizOp 6 may have originally been in the SLA committee, but because they're so related, we're going to have them presented together here. 6 is the credentialing data report, and 7 is the annual report required of the General Assembly about the number and amount of bonuses that are provided to CTE teachers for teaching students with these credentials. Dr. Nancy Cross is here to cover both of these as discussion items, and welcome. We're glad you're here.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here, especially after the event we attended yesterday in Union County, where we released our credential attainment report and our statistics, and had 3 students there and 3 industry partners, and just the excitement in that automotive shop of those students and industry partners talking about the significance of what I'm getting ready to share with you, which is about our credential attainment. So when we look at research, we know that industry recognized credentials are labor market currency for our students. They translate to higher wages, they translate to better jobs, they translate to more opportunities for promotion within jobs, and that those opportunities are especially important for our underserved students. We know that of the adults ages 25 and over, 41% of them have no more than a high school diploma. However, in the 22-23 school year, 62% of our career and technical education concentrators graduated with not only a high school diploma, but also an industry recognized credential aligned to their pathway of concentration. So we know that we're doing the work. We're exceeding where our adults 25 and older currently are in terms of credential attainment. The work really falls in these 3 sort of areas. One is a focus on providing opportunities to all students. We haven't always had the luxury of doing that, but with additional funding, it's created a mindset shift for us, and we're now able to offer credentials to more students. And then make sure that we're offering credentials of value, and certainly the word value has a different meaning in different circumstances. If I am using a saw and cut my finger, if someone's nearby with a first aid credential, that's a credential of value to me at that moment, right? However, from an industry standpoint, we work with NC Commerce to tier our credentials, and we'll talk more about the tiers later, but we don't tier them within CTE. We go to the experts at NC Commerce, specifically in the Labor and Economic Development analysis division, and they tier our credentials. Tier 1 credentials aren't attached to bonus money that you'll hear about later. Tier 2 have a $25 bonus for teachers. Tier 3 credentials have a $50 bonus. So we are working to align our credentials with the NC workforce credentials and make sure that they are credentials of value. And then lastly, that resource piece, not only the money that's needed to credential students, the $15.8 million the General Assembly has given us, but also resources like a credential directory. If I'm a CTE director serving a district offering 70 plus credential opportunities to students, knowing who the vendor is, how to contact them, what requirements there are to offer that credential within my district can be overwhelming. So we've compiled an electronic credential directory so that our directors at their fingertips can know exactly how to start the implementation for a particular credential. And lastly, the work is never ending when we start talking about opportunity gaps and looking at that data by tiers, by gender, by subgroups to make sure that all students are having access. Part of that work involves what we call an opportunity gap analysis workshop. We've already completed those workshops with 10 of our districts. We're investing in the people at the district level to be able to take their data and slice it in multiple ways to make sure that all subgroups are equitably represented across all our opportunities. So the Credential Attainment Report isn't just a report, it is a tool for improvement. It provides trend data, an individual to combine credential crosswalk, talks about our tier structure. A new part we're really excited about, even though we've reported around equity and access to you previously, we have not included that in our report, our formal report, and it's there now. And then we talk about stackable credentials and that alignment to the NC workforce credentials. So just quickly, we're going to walk through the trends. We've been collecting data for 13 years. We truncated our trend graph a little bit this year and started in the 2016-17 year. When we initially started collecting data, the state only earned about 25,000 credentials statewide. Wake County earned more than that alone this year. So just to sort of put a perspective on how the numbers have changed. But the first jump that you'll notice, the first really interesting year is that first increase. And that's attributed to, you can go ahead to the next slide. That's attributed to our change in reporting with our NCCER credentials, where in some cases a student in one course could earn 8 or 10 credentials. Previously, they were reported as a lump earned credential of all those modules, but this is the year that you see that big jump that we started reporting those individually. Then our data leveled off for a little while until, like everyone else in so many ways, we experienced a slide related to COVID-19. And we also pulled work keys from our data. The ACT work keys is given to all of our concentrators. However, it's not aligned to a particular CTE course. And we wanted the report to reflect credentials earned that are aligned directly to our courses. So we pulled work keys data. Then we see our beautiful pandemic rebound that we're very excited about. And that also continues through to this year with our record number of credentials, 325,784 credentials earned. That represent a huge mindset shift across our state. So previously, when we were only funded for about 10% of our credential opportunities, directors had to be very strategic about which students got those opportunities. But with $15.8 million, the mindset now is credential them all. Give them one or more opportunities to earn those credentials. So of course you see the great growth there. We also started talking 3 years ago about this concept of credential attainment rates. There are a certain number of credentials available based on students enrolled in courses. And your credential attainment rate then is what percent of those you're able to convert to an actual earned, in someone's head, credential, right? So 3 years ago, that was 15% of all the credentials there. And for sake of ease of explanation, we're going to use the number 100. Let's say there were 100 credentials available. It means 15 of them were actually earned. So the next year, that number almost doubled, increased to 28%. So out of every 100 opportunities, 28 of them were earned. And then this past year, out of every 100 opportunities, 41% of them were converted to an earned credential, like Michael talked about with his welding certification. In your hand leads to a job. So I'm really excited about what this shows to us graphically. You can see in blue 2 years ago, numbers from 2 years ago. Last year's, the 22-23 data is in orange. And what you see is this gigantic shift to the right. It means that more and more of our PSUs are converting more and more of their credentials to earned credentials. 57% of them are above the statewide credential attainment rate. We only have 10 districts still converting fewer than 20% of their credentials to earned credentials. And we're going to continue to support them. There is provided in the report an individual to combine crosswalk. I mentioned this earlier with NCCER. Another great example is career management. This is where our durable skills are directly taught to students. Things like attitude, communication, critical thinking, media rules, and so forth. You can see that some students earn one or more of those, but not the full set, the full suite of those. There were over 4,000 students who did earn all of those. And then here's where we get into our tier structure, and so you'll see these laid out within the report. But we know that our Tier 1 credentials are credentials that are foundational. These are credentials that give students the opportunity to learn about the persistence of completing a credential. And they often build to Tier 2 and Tier 3 credentials. So within the report, you'll see that completely broken down by course and by credential. And then we look at the data across tiers, and so you can see the different attainment rates based strictly on the tier of the credentials. The far right does demonstrate all credentials earned. Notice that with the orange number representing how many credentials are available, that certainly declines as you increase tiers. Remember, some of the credentials are only available to students who are 18 or older, for instance, or have some other prerequisites that might prohibit high school students from even achieving those credentials. But we work to provide Tier 3 credentials that are aligned to our courses and are attainable by our students. So here you'll see the Tier 1, the top 10 Tier 1 credentials. We see a lot of food handlers. I eat way too much fast food, and I'm very thankful. Anytime I see a Serve Safe certification, I know they know how to handle my food. So we're getting a lot of our students. We also know that about 75% of all of our folks who enter the workforce at some point or another in their career will work in food services. So that's a great Tier 1 credential to have. And then we move on to Tier 2 credentials. These are the top 10 Tier 2 credentials. We see more technology here, lots of Adobe. We heard yesterday from industry partners how important those credentials are to them. And move into construction and that sort of thing. Tier 3, our top 10 credentials. Excel Expert. Now, many of you might say, oh, I can use a spreadsheet. Take the Excel Expert credential. It's Tier 3 for a reason. It's no joke. It's not an easy credential to earn. Lots more Adobe, computers, vet tech, vet assisting, that sort of thing with Tier 3. So we also have broken, this is just a taste of our opportunity gap analysis workshop. So we looked at, in the green column, you see the CTE enrollment with credential opportunities. So how many of our students, and we started all the way back at total North Carolina Public Schools enrollment, then we went down to the subgroup of CTE enrollment, and then we narrowed it even further. Of all the kids taking CTE classes, how many of them are in a class that have a credential opportunity? That's our comparison data. That's what we want to reflect across all our tiers and all our opportunities. What we notice is there's a gap, an opportunity gap with Tier 2 credentials because only 34% of those are being earned by female students. However, they make up 45% of our comparison population. So we know that they're underrepresented there. We see a couple of other disparities highlighted, and then we break it down on the next slide more specifically so that you can see that a little clearer. And on Tier 1, there's a small overrepresentation with our female students with Tier 1 credentials. Therefore, there's a small underrepresentation with our male students. Other comparisons are very comparable there in Tier 1. In Tier 2, here we see a significant underrepresentation among our female students, and therefore a significant overrepresentation with our male students. We also see our Black and African American students being underrepresented by about 8 points, which means somewhere, some combination, there has to be an overrepresentation, and it just about all resides with our white students that are about 8 percentage points overrepresented with Tier 2 credentials. And then lastly, what are deemed as our most valuable credentials because of their academic rigor and the fact that they're usually a part of a job posting, a requirement to get a particular job. We see that our Black and African American students are underrepresented by 10 percentage points. White and Asian students make up that overrepresentation. We also here see female students underrepresented by about 7 percentage points and male students overrepresented. So we know that we have some work to do to make sure that, especially where those credentials of value are concerned, that all students are having access to those opportunities. All right, and then our report moves on to just this concept of stackable credentials, again, that you start with a Tier 1 credential in an entry-level course, something like first aid, and then move to perhaps some more Tier 1, but they're building. So now we're in CPR, we have OSHA, Stop the Bleed, and then students move on to major level courses, and that's where you'll find the Tier 2 and Tier 3 credentials. We also know in terms of enrollment that our enrollment decreases almost by half, and that's not it's not a one county thing, it's not a statewide thing, it's a nationwide thing. When students start experiencing CTE classes, we want them to explore, and many students will take level 1 courses, but then about half as many move on to the next level, and about half of those move on to the next. We are very concerned about making sure that our credentials are valuable to our students and working to connect those to the NC workforce credentials, and extremely excited about the fact that of all our credentials earned, in that last bullet there, 31% of them are from the North Carolina Workforce Credentials list. We have certainly by regions across the state a breakdown. And you can see that of course, by population, the orange bars represent how many credentials were available. The blue bars represent how many were actually earned. So we see certainly some disparities. We know that our populations reside mostly in the north central and southwest regions and Piedmont Triad. And so those are our largest bars there. And then our highest number of attainment, these are mostly our top 10 districts in size. However, there are 4 that are smaller than one of our top 10 districts that were able to earn enough credentials to be on the top 10 attainment list. Randolph County, Davidson, Harnett, and Caldwell County are all represented here. And then our highest credential attainment rates. So now of the percent who are earned, how many were converted to actual earned credentials of the percent that were available. So what's super exciting here is to see someone like Hyde County rock out and be number 1 on this list with over 80% credential attainment. Tiny district, they only had 447 credentials, but converted 365 of them to a credential of currency and put it in a student's hand. So very excited for them. And then when we look at our report, you will further see the credential attainment rate by every PSU, and this is just a snapshot of that, but in the actual report you can see the entire list of all of our PSUs. So our priorities for improvement, we continue to incorporate credentialing information across our work in CTE, but we're excited to incorporate that into our newly legislated career development plans that students should know along their CDP where they plan to earn
The truck's gonna be
credentials.
here with a jack left on it, and they're gonna bring the signs tomorrow.
And we are going to continue to enhance our data and information portal along with that electronic credential directory. We hope to add some credential dashboards and those sorts of things that will help our districts. And then just working along with partners like NC Workforce and NC Commerce to make sure that we are offering the best credentials possible and supporting PSUs in the implementation of the existing opportunities. I think we have just a couple more priorities for improvement to keep talking about opportunity gaps, to develop those dashboards to help districts, and to continue to increase the efficacy and efficiency and accuracy in collecting and reporting our earned credentials. Are there questions?
Any questions or comments? Yes, Dr. Arkenheim.
I have a feeling if you and I went out to dinner or shopping, all we could talk about is credentials.
Yes, yeah, I can do that.
My question is this, so according to a couple of frames back, so a pharmacy technician with those credentials can leave high school and go into that position, into that field without going on to, let's say, community college?
Right, to be a pharmacy tech at a pharmacy, that credential will, is out of high school, yes.
That is terrific.
Yep.
That was amazing work.
Yes, Dr. Truitt.
Thank
Excuse me,
you.
Superintendent Truitt.
Thank you. I'll answer anything. Thank you so much. Last week, I went to Harnett County Schools to award them a CTE grant, and I met several students who were getting their Electrical 2 certificates. And when these students graduate from high school with that Electrical 2 certificate, they are halfway through their apprenticeship, which of course is a very specific term with very specific requirements. And so the leadership in that school, the CTE leadership, had asked industry partners to come in and so they could introduce these students, and those students were leaving high school with a job and then the ability to finish the second half of that apprenticeship. I just, especially looking, I just have two things to say. Looking at the list of the attainment rates as opposed to just the raw numbers, and we see all these incredible Hyde County, Caldwell County, Yancey County, Pender, Burke, Transylvania, Camden, Cherokee. These are small rural districts whose local leadership has done whatever they needed to do in order to get the materials that they needed to offer these courses, find the people to teach them. It is something that you have to really want to do. And our local superintendents and their principals are so committed to doing this because they know that this is going to, as we have seen multiple times today, improve the lives of their students. Of course, as you all know, the chair and I sit on the board of My Future NC, and the data we've been looking at for the last couple of years from a statewide perspective is very concerning, and that is that only 30% of our students in North Carolina graduate every year and get a 2 or 4 year degree or credential of value by the time they're 24 years old. That is very concerning. What we need to do now is work with My Future to make sure that this data of tier 2 and 3 credentials is represented in that 30% number so that we have a full and accurate picture of how many students are earning any kind of 2 year, 4 year degree or credential of value by the time they are 24, because 30% is way too few. And we know that if kids are earning all of these credentials, well, we know that they are in high school, that those credentials need to convert, and they're not converting. And so this is where we hope that the career development plan legislation will help our students, because they're going to have to develop that in middle school. It will follow them to 10th grade. There will be software available to them where they can do career exploration, interest surveys and inventories. But then moreover, thanks to My Future NC and the Department of Commerce, we have nccareers.org, which will also let anyone see what jobs are available to them within a 30-mile radius of where they live, what they need to do to get credentialed to do that job, how much money they will make, who is hiring, where they need to go to get the credential, and how much it will cost them to get the credential, so that we can ensure that everyone who wants a job can have the training that they need to get that job.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your crosswalk.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you for those. All right, that completes this
Oh,
side.
Kim?
Sorry, Kim.
No worries. I was just wanting to say, just jumping off of what the superintendent said, looking back at that list of those tier 1 credentials as a classroom teacher, so often I hear my students talk about life skills. And when we meet with parents, they talk about life skills compared to the curriculum. So many of those tier 1 credentials that our kids can earn right now in our schools, right now, are the very life skills that students or parents are going, they didn't teach me that in high school.
Right.
The courses are here, and if we continue to elevate our
Right.
CTE programs, I think a lot of the questions and concerns that exist in broader conversation can be answered by what we already offer in our public schools. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. Well, our next item is Biz Op 7. As I said, it was related, but this presentation will be much shorter given the
Much.
presentation that we just had, so thank you.
Yes, so this is how we convert then our credentials that were earned to the teacher bonuses that are attached to those. Again, our credentials are divided across 3 tiers, and we have the tier 1, which does not result in bonus money, but of the tier 2 and 3 credentials that were earned across our state, 117 PSUs had teachers qualify for credential bonuses across 408 schools. About 200 more teachers qualified this year than the previous year, so over 1,600 teachers. There were over 42,000 tier 2 credentials, and again, the allotment there is $25 per credential, and over 9,000 tier 3 credentials at $50 each. There is a cap, a maximum bonus awarded of $3,500. 73 teachers exceeded that, and so were awarded the $3,500, and that reduced the overall allocation from about $1.5 million to $1.4 million. The average teacher bonus was $860. So here you see the top 10 schools for teacher bonus allocation. Not a lot of big surprises. It is mostly our larger school districts, and then those school districts that might be a little bit smaller, but certainly we're knocking the top out in terms of credential attainment. They account for almost half of the credential allotment is within these 10 districts. And then we're asked each year to survey our recipients of bonus money and ask 3 specific questions. One is, did the credential bonus influence your decision to remain in the teaching profession? Of those respondents this year, 35% said yes. The previous year, that number was 38, so certainly statistically in the same ballpark. And then 24% acknowledged that the credential bonus payment did influence their decision to expand or change courses taught. The previous year, that was only 20%. And then the last thing we ask are, were they made aware of the teacher credential bonus when they were hired and entered the teaching profession? 22% said they were. The previous year, that number was 20%. So yes, as Vice Chair Duncan said, much shorter presentation. Are there any questions about our bonuses?
All right, not seeing anything. Dr. Cross, thank you very much for your report on both of these items.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, that brings us into Biz Op 8, which is our last discussion item of the day. This is our ARP ESSER 3 update with respect to where the funds are and some proposals that are attached to that update. Alexis Schaus is here to make
Yes,
the
sir.
presentation.
Yes, Biz Op 8. In your materials, you do have 2 documents. One of them, it provides a line item status of all the ESSER items that have been approved and have been implemented or are currently being implemented. So at the top, just like we had last month, we had a report showing the ESSER 2 items, which has now expired. This is in a similar format, and you will see the top items designated by a PRC code, a program report code. Those are items that are allocations out to the PSUs. The largest item being our PRC 181, which by the federal law, legislation surrounding this grant, requires the state to allocate out 90% of the total grant, that's $3.2 billion, out to the PSUs in a prescribed formula. And you can see there that 24% of those funds remain. Much of the school districts use these funds for kind of HVAC and those kind of expenditures. And so they are, those expenditures are coming in a little bit slower during the earlier supply chain issues. The remaining about $116 million is managed at the department, and the appropriations bill actually in the last session just added 8 additional items. They took out 1 item and added 8 items with that same money. So you'll see some of the items where it has a revised budget, those, if there are like 0 expenditures or 100% remaining, those are those 8 items that were just added, and they are currently being, some of them are contracts, and we are kind of putting them through that. Actually, one of them was $1 million addition to that robotics grant, and as you can see, that is well on its way to getting out the door to the school districts. What the financial staff do at this time, when we did the closeout of ESSA 2, as I explained last month, we are managing all the ESSA grants kind of as one, and so where we could move expenditures down from ESSA 3 onto ESSA 2 to avoid any reversions, naturally some budget amounts are higher than the actual amount needed, right? So there's a difference there, and so we don't want those funds to get reverted, so we move the expenditures down from ESSA 3. Specifically, when you're looking at this report, you'll see like a negative amount related to letters. Okay, that wasn't a reduction to the program, that was just that the expenditures went on to ESSA 2 and then alleviated the budget for ESSA 3. And so as we go through this process, which is a continual process, right, of evaluating, it takes quite a lot of work to make sure that we're managing all these ESSA grants to optimize our available funding and to make sure we can make the best use of it. So as we went through that, we had the ESSA 2 amounts that alleviated some funds from ESSA 3. We also had some items that, when we were evaluating the budget amount versus the needs, we kind of generated additional funding that of unobligated funds that we could request programs for. So now to the other amount that we will, the other report that is in your materials, that is the unobligated amounts and our request for the use of those funds from the department. You'll see on the first document that actually had $4.6 million that was unobligated. This list of requests, 6 items, actually totals $5.5 million. We do believe that as we continually, every month, evaluate these line items, move items, adjust budgets, that additional funding may become available. And so when you're looking at this list, you'll see with one of the NCVPS, it says up to $2 million. That's kind of a whatever is left over on to make available for that. So I do have the real experts on each one of these line items, but I'm going to kind of give it a go on it, and then if you have questions, to ask them to respond to them as they know the details of these requests. So the first 2 items from Dr. Rend, our Chief Information Officer, has requested. The first item is to allow the continuation of the Rethink grant to be able to continue to pay for professional development stipends to teachers related to this grant and support the staff through July of 2025. We've been able to do that by kind of managing some expenditures from this grant as well as ESSA. Obviously, July of 2025 is past ESSA amount, but we would kind of manage some of the current expenditures to allow for this extension. Keeping in mind also that these staff are the staff that have the expertise in evaluating the remote academies. And so it is to our best benefit to extend their employment to perform that legislative required work. The request amounts to $1,475,000 to be able to complete that professional development and to continue the employment of those staff. The second item from Dr. Wren and with Director Matthew Mayo is related to the AI Collaborative. This is under the digital teaching and learning area, and it will provide an education AI summit and collaborative cohort led by DPI and PSU leaders from across the state. And the request, it is further down on the list, is for $100,000 to complete that. If there are questions for Dr. Wren, she is here on behalf of both of those directors.
Can I ask a question? Did you say $400,000?
For the second item, it is $100,000.
Thank you, I misheard it, thank you.
Quick question. For the continuation of the Rethink grant at $1.4 million, what's the breakdown in percentage of what goes to staff and what goes to stipends?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I would not
Yeah.
I would not have that breakdown right now. I can tell you that they have already badged 1,600 teachers across the state, so I know a tremendous amount of that has gone towards the badging of teachers. There's 8 FTE that are tied to that. The original grant from the United States Department of Education in April of 2020 was for $17.8 million. And we have been approved by the USED to continue that grant through June 30th of 2025. So there are funds left over from that grant that go towards this as well. So this is not, the 1.475 is not all that's supporting this. There are a significant amount of funds from the grant left over. We were approved to continue this just based off demonstrated effectiveness to the USED.
And then the second question also is for the AI Collaborative. Who's the audience and what's the number of people you believe will participate in that?
Yeah, we are targeting to participate 500 educators across the state, a Western collaborative and an Eastern state collaborative. And it will be led by teacher ambassadors across the state who will take a deep dive into how to use this EdTech tool effectively and safely. And they will become somewhat ambassadors for our state.
When?
We want to start that as soon as possible, looking at April, May.
Okay, and is it, and I guess my last question about it is, the collaborative is informed in line with the guidance and everything that came out recently as well from the department?
That's correct, that's correct. And we are going to make a presentation on our guidance at the next month's meeting.
Any questions on this while Dr. Wren's at the podium? Thank you.
Thank you.
Alexis, one thing as you stand back up you may want to say is there's been some questions sometimes raised about that some ESSER III funds could be used after the deadline of September 30th of this year. If that's the case, what are the guidelines or the rules for if you can do that, just so the board has a firm idea in mind about that?
Yes, the funds have to be encumbered, right? So we could not, and certain expenditures can be encumbered, like contracts, right? Contract for service, or if you have a purchase that you're getting in HVAC and it hasn't, you've purchased it, you've put the purchase order in, but you haven't actually received it, you have a liquidation period. So it's not that this is actually a normal, this is a normal thing for all federal grants, that you have a September 30th end, but you have this kind of liquidation period in order to kind of finish off all and get things in and get bills paid. That is not like our state grants, right? I mean, our state funds. Our state funds, you have to have paid for and received by June 30th. So it is kind of more favorable than how we have to manage our state funds.
So those rules, as you just described them, would apply to the department for any funding that it would be using, but also for the districts.
That's correct. Yes, it is for the public school units as well as the department. It is, that's how federal funds go, yeah.
Thank you for that clarification.
So I'm going to take the easier ones for me. They're not maybe for you, but they're easier ones for me, and then kind of bring on some other people for the top ones. But the next item I'm going to discuss is under Dr. Michael Marr and for Dr. Andrew Smith. This is related to NCVPS summer course funding. The ESSER funds, actually ESSER funds in general, have supported NCVPS and the covering of summer courses the last couple of summers. So this is a request to utilize the funding up to the $2 million to continue that for this upcoming summer. And then the bottom item is under Dr. Derek Jordan and our Senior Director of EC, Caroline Hutchins, related to the Extend Project Aware. This grant has been very successful, and there is a request to extend the programming for $304,000 for some specific school districts. The next item is related to Portrait of a Graduate, and I'm going to ask, it says under our state superintendent and her special advisor, Christy Van Wakken, for 3 separate items under Portrait of a Graduate. Yeah. I need to be bailed out here.
Thank you, Alexis. Thank you, Chair Davis, Superintendent Truitt, advisors, rest of the board. Delighted to be here to talk about Portrait of a Graduate, one of my passion points. So this request is for 3 components of Module 3B. The total amount is $321,880. And the 3 components are a portrait to practice, which would be creating online modules so that our teachers can create and facilitate online learning experiences for students that are aligned to our standards, and then also to the durable skills which we know employers value in North Carolina. The second would be to create and to host regional workshops across the state to help facilitate a train-the-trainer type of model, so that we will train facilitators throughout the state to work within their districts and within their regions to help populate and to ensure that we have great fidelity to the rubrics that have been created around the portrait, and that we are really capitalizing and maximizing on what's already happening in our classrooms right now. That will culminate in an experience at the AIM conference to really bring the whole piece together and to really celebrate the work of the Portrait of a Graduate across the state. And then third is a crosswalk with other state initiatives, including those for employability skills and CTE, our ISTE standards, Leader in Me, which you heard about earlier today, SEL, and many others that really touch upon Portrait of a Graduate durable skills, but in different kinds of ways. So we would like to create that crosswalk as a resource for our districts so they can really understand how to apply the durable skills in a variety of different environments across the state. So the online learning modules are about $250,000 of the total ask, regional workshops at just under $50,000, and then the crosswalk at $23,900. The contract would be an extension and amendment to the one we currently have with Battelle for Kids.
Any questions? Comments? Thank you for that update.
Thank you.
And I didn't really stop for questions related to the Project Aware. I do have Caroline Hutchins. If you do have any questions or you'd like to hear further about that very promising grant and the results with our students.
Interesting, that was discussed earlier in our meeting today, by the presentation by DHHS as being a very effective program. So, anyone have further questions about it? We've had presentations on Project Aware here before, so I think the board members are pretty familiar with it.
Excellent. And then the final one is with Dr. Derek Jordan and Dr. Tom Tomberlin, related to an evaluation and assessment of advanced teaching roles. And I'm also going to ask Dr. Tomberlin to come up to present this request.
Good afternoon. So technically, this shouldn't be called an evaluation because we already have an evaluation of the ATR program. This is more of an exploration and an assessment of the advanced teaching roles. So these adult leadership teachers in our advanced teaching roles. We're proposing to do a really intensive research project into what are the factors that make these teachers more or less successful in growing other teachers. And part of the reason we're doing this is to help districts develop a selection process that they can be confident in that will yield these adult leadership teachers that will be great mentors and leaders for the population of teachers that they're serving. Our partners in the evaluation process are the Friday Institute. They are taking the lead on this project in partnership with another group called BASIS, which employs some North Carolina researchers in the state. And they're going to do, this is a mixed method study. They're going to use both quantitative and qualitative research methods to try to determine this. So if you read the prospectus, it does go a little deeper than what I'm describing, in that one of the key goals of this is if we can identify these measures that make these great advanced teachers, can we backtrack that to develop scaffolded not career trajectories, but skill attainment for our early career teachers. So being very clear and intentional with our teachers very early on, these are the skills you need to develop, to what degree, to hopefully one day become one of these advanced teachers. We're really excited about this. We have some great researchers that are committed to working on this project, and we hope that you'll support it.
Question?
I do
Dr.
have a
Arsenault.
quick question, and I think, thank you so much for
Yeah.
the presentation. And does this stem from the discussion we had back in the fall, when there was some questions about methodology in terms of how we were evaluating the ATR?
No, ma'am. So the evaluation itself of ATR, during that last report, we surfaced some ways to collect the data differently to help us support the impact of ATR on individual teachers. Whereas we were evaluating ATR based on school level performance. And so that was a great conversation that helped us understand that we need to do better data collection to provide that kind of evaluation. That is not part of this request, but that change is coming to the evaluation process. We've already implemented that change and met with districts earlier this month to talk about what the data collection looks like.
Thank you. You answered my question.
Great.
There at the end.
Ms. Kim?
Dr. Tolman, is this sort of, does this have anything to do with the fact that we are getting an increased amount of money invested in those roles every year, and it's time to make sure that we're selecting?
Yes, that was one of the impetus, one of the pushes for me was we know this program is growing and that there's much heavier investments in this. It is in the interest of the state and the State Board of Education to ensure that the way districts select these teachers and how they implement these ATR models, that they've got the best research of what we know to date on this. The evaluation doesn't look quite as deeply as what this is doing. This is really about establishing, districts need to understand what these measures of effectiveness are, and quite frankly, we need measures of effectiveness that transcend testing. If the goal of this is to expand it out into other subjects and areas that do not fall under state testing, then this is really important and necessary work.
It is very important because we tend to cluster a lot of advanced teachers in tested areas.
Yes.
So, great, music to my ears.
Yeah.
That's great.
Other questions or comments? All right, not hearing
Thank
any.
you.
Thank you, Dr. Conlon. Ms. Schaus, what else do you have for us?
Was this not enough? I feel inadequate. Nothing really. This is here for discussion, and it is going to hopefully come back for action next month after your deliberation.
Well, thank you for the presentation. Thank you to all the presenters who came to provide additional detail. Thank you for that. All right, we have two consent items. Biz Op 9 is, as previously referred to, certification of North Carolina finance officers. Very good news. We have two new certifications, one in Granville County, one in Beaufort County. Biz Op 10 is a policy amendment for the allotment relating to the business system modernization. In the original LEA allotment, it named specific vendors. Now we go to a more generic language usage as opposed to naming specific vendors in our policy. We have the update on contracts both executed and planned. I have not heard any questions on those, but I paused now in case there are any. And then finally, we have the requested update on the monthly budget report, and I don't know of any questions that have not already been resolved on that, so I'll pause in case there are. Not hearing any, we have completed our report from Chair Davis. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan. That concludes our open discussions for today. Before we move into closed session, I'll remind all those attending that we will not be returning for open discussion after this closed session, but we will reconvene tomorrow, February 1st, promptly at 9 a.m. Now request a motion to go into closed session. Vice Chair Duncan.
I move that we go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11, A1, 3, and 6. And to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Sections 115C-319 and -321, and 132-6.1C et sec. To consider the qualifications, competence, performance, or condition of appointment of public officers or employees or prospective public officers or employees, and to consult with our attorneys in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorneys and the public body, including a discussion of the following pending cases: In re Bridges Educational Foundation, Inc., Toomer versus State Board of Education, Vega versus NCDPI, and Phillips versus NCDPI.
Motion by Vice Chair Duncan, is there a second? Mr. Keenan. Mr. Fafario, we call the roll to capture the vote.
Dr. Oxendine?
Yes.
Ms. Chemnitz?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Yes. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. Blackburn?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Treasurer Falwell? Lieutenant Governor Robinson? Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Chair Davis?
Yes, motion carries. Let's be in closed session in 10 minutes.